Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may not have prepared you for. As always, I am AJ, and sitting across from me, Jason. Jason, how are you doing today?
Doing great today, AJ. It is the end of the semester. Classes are done. Grades are in. The holidays are coming in fast. So, yeah, it's good.
Well, when the listeners listen to this, one holiday will at least have passed.
Yeah.
So that'll be Monday, the Monday after Christmas.
Yeah. So, the travel plans are in place. The kids are in their last day of school. So, yeah, it's a good day. It's one of those milestones. You're like, all right,
Halfway
past this point in the year.
Yep.
They seem to be going faster and faster these days.
As the older you get, the quicker they go, is what I've learned.
Yeah, what is that, relative time versus actual time?
Sure, it sounds like something Einstein would come up with.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like time is going by faster, so in your mind, it really is.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
That's frightening to think about.
I don't know. Your semester end okay?
Yeah, got the grades in. Everything's good. Got my grades back for my program, so that was good. It ended well.
As my dad used to ask me about once every couple of years in college. So you passing?
I passed.
Hey, good to hear.
Yep. We're down to our last semester for coursework, and then we got our dissertation proposal to defend, and then we have the actual dissertation to defend after that. So,
and that'll be it.
Getting down to the wire. So, looking forward to it. Well, today's episode we're going back to a listener question. I love these because these are not the topic we're talking about today is not something that's really going to be, it's not specifically helpful for a certain point in your time in college or listeners' time in college, but it's just kind of us shooting the bull and talking about some fun times. But somebody asked us what was some of the funniest or best times we've ever experienced in class as the professor. So what you think about that?
Oh, that sounds good. It'll take me a minute to think about some funny episodes. But yeah, we can do that one. Hey, before we jump in though, got to remind everybody, hit us up on our website, Reschool'd with a D, not an ED. Send us a message on social media. Let us know what you're thinking. We love these listener comments, questions, because they make for entertaining episodes. So keep shooting those at us again, either on our website or via social media app. And then, of course, favorite podcasting app, continue to give us all the stars, like us, all that kind of stuff, share it with other people so we can keep this thing going.
All right. So we're just going to skip the quick question because that's really our quick question is what are some of the best times? I'll go first.
Yeah. You jump into the water here. Give me a minute to think.
Because I it's funny because I had these listed out and then all of a sudden one just popped in my head and it was probably, like looking back, it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But at the moment, it was one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever been through. And it wasn't uncomfortable for me just because, the situation. I mean, it was, it is what it is. But what I saw afterwards was so uncomfortable in the moment. And then looking back, I'm like, y'all idiots. So I was teaching this class. It was a summer class, or no, it had to have been in the winter. It was a winter class. And so all my students were sitting in there and we were going through like a study day. So it was kind of like we were doing problems up on the board. So I'd get the students to come up and do problems on the board. They would do it. And this one of my students was a female and she came in with this knitted sweater top, nothing under it. And I'm not looking at this stuff at the beginning of class. I'm not looking at this stuff all through the class. So
you got to turn the blinders on.
But that's the thing. Like I didn't even know it until it was too late. So I said, okay, here's the problem. And I called her up. So she stood up in front. She had to get in front of a class and do this problem and explain it to the class in turn every time to the class. Now, at this moment, I would probably say it was a 60-40 ratio of guys to girls in the class. And apparently it was a little cold in the classroom that day. And so she's sitting there and I'm thinking, oh, Jesus. And
you realize your folly as soon as you got her up to the board.
As soon as she turned around to explain the problem, I thought, oh, Jesus. And to see every guy in the class they paid attention to her more than they paid attention to me ever.
Of course.
But what made
they understood that problem backwards.
Oh, God, yeah. They knew it well. And they asked a lot of questions, too. But the thing that made it the uncomfortable part for me, and like I said, the funny part looking back is, so she sat back down. Everything was fine. We kept going through class. And then into class. Now, remember, this was a study session. So this was a class that happened really right before a test. Like, I think this was the Thursday class. The test was Tuesday. After class, when class was over and I, let everybody out, she had 7 guys around her asking questions, trying to get study sessions set up, giving her their numbers. I thought, oh crap, dude, these guys are getting creepy now. And then I look back and go, oh God, this has been, woo. And so, yeah, that would have,
you were doing a dating service.
I was.
A round table for it.
It was Tinder.
Laying out the options.
I was like, God. And then, God bless her, she was eating it up too. She was trying to set up study sessions and everything, but yeah.
Well, at least she was happy about the outcome. She was. Otherwise, she's like, "Well, what's going on here?"
Yeah, well, it was one of those things. Like she was, the class was quiet nature, but man, that day I've never had more participation, more interaction, at least with students with another student, than I've ever seen in my life.
Well, I've got one that it was nowhere near that comical, but I always make students at the beginning of semesters introduce themselves. It's that first day thing. Just stand up, and this is easier when you have less than 30 people in a class. And this was one of those smaller classes type size. So it was, I guess, 30 people in a class. And they don't have to say much about themselves. Just, who are they? What do they want to get out of school, this class, that type of thing, any career ambitions or anything they're just particularly proud of that they want the world to know about them. And so normally this runs very smoothly. People don't have much to say about themselves at this point. They might have some ambitions, things like that, but usually you don't have much on the accomplishment front that people are bragging about. Well, there's one girl in the class, and don't get me wrong, this girl was absolutely gorgeous. She was a beautiful young lady. And she goes up to the front of the classroom and she tells a couple of things, where she's from, blah, blah, blah. But then she tells the things she's proud of. And she says, I have been a Hooters waitress for 2 years. And I hold the record company-wide for the highest amount of tips in any given month in the company's history.
Wow.
And that was what she was proud of. And, the questions that flowed from this, you can imagine. So otherwise the classes kind of just sit back, not pay much attention. Well, of course. I mean, what does everybody want to know? Well, how much did you bring in?
Uh-huh.
How many days did you work? Did you get any one single tip? Was there? And, apparently there was some celebrities that came through that dropped a huge tip on the tab several times. And there was, all in all, but what was the demoralizing part was she made more than my salary that month.
Holy crap.
My annual salary that month. So, it's so for all those aspiring Hooters waitresses out there, apparently there are months where you can do better than 100 G's.
Oh yeah, G's. That's crazy. And there's so many deep questions that come from that. Like I would have, what celebrities is going to Hooters?
That's a good question. I don't know. But I will say this: in college, I waited tables all the way through, and there were some big dogs that rolled through in some of the restaurants. I waited on some NFL players and stuff like that. A couple of movie actors and things like that. And I will say this:
but you weren't working at Hooters.
Yeah, I know. And my tip wasn't that awesome. They tipped like everybody else, and they ordered just about like everybody else. Maybe didn't hold back on the bottle of wine or whatever. So, but yeah. So anyway, that just popped to mind. That was not one of them that I had, top of mind, but similar scenario. So, what else you got?
So when I first started teaching, I had hair, and I didn't have a beard. And so I was clean shaven, and I looked a whole lot younger. And but I had this thing I always wanted to do when I was a student. I told myself if I ever got to teach, this is what I was going to do. So the first day of class, I would get there early, and I would sit in the back of the class, and I would act like a student the first day because nobody knew me, and it helped my name. So AJ, my whole name is Ali John Kuti. And so that's where the AJ comes from. But on their ticket for the class, it just says Ali Kuti. That's it. Or Ali. Ali is a very common name down here in the South too. And so students didn't have a clue who the professor was. And I thought, oh, this is great. Because our college is a non-traditional college. So a lot of older students were there too. But I just fit right in with the students. So I would dress in a pair of jeans and a polo or something like that, something that, students may wear on the first day. And I would sit in the back and I would have my book open and all the students would come in and I would try to strike up conversations with the students like the first day, like, have you ever heard of this professor? Is it a guy or a girl? Do they have a thick accent? Because, the name has an accent. And then eventually I would pop up and I would get to the front of the class. Well, one semester, let me preface this by saying too, any of my students that's ever had me before in class that have gone through that, they know if they take me again in the next semester, just play along, just go with it, see what we can get. And so one of the semesters I went in there, I sat in the back, and one of my former students came in, so he saw what I was doing, and he was playing along. But there was this guy sitting in the back, and he was just kind of had his his head in his hand. He had his book open, but he was super bored and you could tell he didn't want to be there. And so I'm sitting there, and I said, yeah, man, not looking for this class, huh? He's like, no. I was like, have you ever heard of this? Have you ever heard anything about this professor? He's like, is it a guy or a girl? Is it, what do you know? And he's like, well, I know it's a guy. I was like, yeah. I said, you know anything about him? Have you heard anything? He's like, yeah, I heard he sucked. I'm like, interesting. And as soon as he said that, the guy who had me before just doubles over laughing. Like he is just cracking up. And this guy goes, what are you laughing about? And and the student goes, you'll find out in a minute. And the guy's like, whatever. And so I'm sitting there and this guy, so when I sat in the back of the class, I never got up right at time. So if the class started at 8, I usually got up at like 8:05. I wanted to see kind of where it would go, the talking would go. And so 8 o'clock came around and this guy was just antsy. He was just like, well, he ain't here. He should be here by now. I'm like, yeah, well, we have to wait a bit longer. And he's like, I'm not waiting very much longer. And so we kept going, and it started to get a little stir crazy. And I can't remember who I said it to, but one of the students around me, they were like, this is just getting ridiculous. I said, are y'all ready to start class? And they were like, yeah, I'm ready to start class. I said, all right. And I shut my book, put my book in my bag, walked to the front of the class. And they're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm a professor. And to see the guy in the back, his face just glossed over and just turned pure white. And he was like, oh, and you could just see like him playing back in his head the scenario of everything that happened. And, everybody got a good laugh and everything. And then at the end of class, he came up to me and he was like, hey, man, I wasn't saying anything about you. This is just what I heard, And I finally told him, I was like, dude, don't worry about it. I don't hold grudges. It's funny to me. I don't care. I said, matter of fact, I'm going to try to prove you wrong. But man, to see that, like you could see every emotion come out of his body through his face at that one singular moment because he lost it. He was just like, I don't. And then the guy who was laughing so hard came back and he pointed at him and said, see? I was like, oh, good Lord, this doesn't help.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I actually tried that one time. And the reason I tried it is because I talked to you about it probably 10 years ago, and you told me you did that. So I tried it. And the internet spoiled it, man.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So I go in, I sit down. I walk in, there's a few people already in the classroom. I didn't want to walk in too early because then, conversations kick up or whatever. So I walk in, I sit down. Nobody says anything, but a few people just kind of look at me. And, when I started teaching, I was relatively young looking too.
Yeah.
And, I still have blonde hair, which is kind of, makes me look a little younger than I am. Or at least it used to. Now it's starting to recede back enough that gives me away. But I'm sitting there, and some dude looks over at me and says, "Aren't you the professor?"
Did you? Please tell me you went like,
"Crap."
You could have played that. You could be like, "Oh yeah, I am, aren't I?" I forgot. My bad.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing their homework now. They're looking
they
on the website. They're wanting to see who they got and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and then that type of thing. So anyway, I tried it, didn't work. So that was a failed experiment.
Yeah.
Let's see. I've got one that was pretty interesting. It started out funny and then turned the opposite direction a little bit. So I teach law or business law classes, and I normally don't teach a lot on criminal law, just because it's a business law class. You go through all your other stuff, transactional mess, starting businesses. But you do have this one section where you go over, okay, this is how criminal law works. It obviously applies in the business context as well because they're business crimes. Anyway, there's this guy. He just rolls in. He never brings a book. He never takes a note. He never does anything except for plays on his phone and acts like he didn't want to be there. And I just leave these guys alone, because honestly, I'm not going to do anything to aid the process there. Kind of a bigger dude, a little combative. So I wasn't going to address it at all unless he created a disturbance. So if he didn't want to get anything out of it, he didn't have to. But that time that we talked about criminal law, finally, this guy looks a little bit engaged. And so I could see it. So I'm all of a sudden, going down the rabbit hole of explaining this stuff about how the process works. And then he raises his hand and asks a couple of questions. He's like, so what happens when, so say you're in Walmart and that they think you got something, and then they run outside and they try to stop you there. They try to tackle you, and you jump in your car with the other guys. I'm like, oh God.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And it's like, you jump in the car, so they don't get to the car, and you pull off, and then all of a sudden the police come up. Can they arrest you? I'm like, well, did you steal something? He's like, well, I mean, I was already gone. And I was like, he obviously didn't answer the question, but yeah, obviously he stole something. And he's like, but I'm off the property. I'm like, yeah. So how's that change anything? He's like, well, I'm gone. How are they going to arrest me if I'd left and then they stopped my car? I was like, did they follow your car out of the parking lot? Right? Was it like a police officer in the parking lot that obviously gets alerted to what just happened, and they follow you out of the parking lot and then pull you over down the road? It's like, well, I didn't even get down the road. I just got across the street. I was like, question still stands. Did they follow you out of the parking lot because you and your buddies had stolen something? Well, yeah, but how can they do that? Because I wasn't even in the parking lot anymore. I'm like, I think you're missing the point here. What does it have to do with you being in the parking lot anymore as to whether they can arrest you for what you just stole? He's like, it just ain't right. It ain't right that they could do that. Because, I mean, I walked out, we'd got in the car and we were gone. I mean, and the whole class is sitting there. They start off laughing. We all start off laughing. I'm laughing kind of when I'm answering the question. But then all of a sudden it gets real serious because this dude is really serious. And, it spills over. This is not this gentleman's first foray being locked up
Oh, that's
for
good.
various either theft or drug-related offenses. And, like I say, I'm a little intimidated by this dude, but he is getting furious with me because I keep going back to, I don't understand why you think they can't arrest you once you've left the Walmart parking lot. Like, what does that have to do with anything? He's like, man, it's wrong. It's wrong. I don't see, man, it's wrong. I don't even get it. I'm like, again, and the whole class, like I say, they turn from laughing, like giggling in their seat. And I guess that starts to get him mad.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden everybody's like, don't say a word.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say a word. This is about to turn bad. And all of a sudden I'm at, well, let's just change pages here. Hopefully you don't get prosecuted over that.
Well, and that's the funny thing too, because so you teach law, so you're going to have stuff like that come up. I teach accounting, and I can tell you there's been times where students are like, I ain't paid taxes in 5 years. I'm like, don't tell me that. Let's keep that to yourself.
Well, luckily you probably don't owe any taxes.
Yeah, that's fortunately
you made all your money under table.
Yeah, I mean I've had a couple of those where like, I used to at the beginning of class, I would give them a sheet and it would be like, what are you hoping to get out of this class? And I've had people say like, I hope to be able to do my taxes so I can pay back the taxes that I owe. And I'm thinking, well, one, this is intro to financial accounting. This is not tax. This is not going to help you anywhere with that. But they would come up to me afterwards and they were like, I've got this and this and this. And can you tell me what they would ask me tax related advice? I'm like, you need to go see a tax professional. Yeah. You need to go talk to somebody.
You need legal assistance because you have broken the law.
Yeah. And to most of the situations, I'm like, it's the lack of knowledge. I get it. They don't understand it or they're missing something. But yeah, I was just like, oh, okay. Little too much information on that one. You could leave that one out.
Oh, and the craziest scenarios never come up during class.
Oh yeah.
But they're coming.
Oh yeah.
Because all of a sudden somebody who doesn't pay attention at all wakes up and they're paying attention hard. They're listening to every question. And then after class, you can see them waiting.
Oh yeah.
There's a line. And the law stuff, oh my gosh, so many divorce questions.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. I got stopped doing 85 and a 35. What do you think's going to happen? I'm like, well, you already know what part of it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Under that super speeder, when they took you to jail and impounded your car for going that fast, well, that was the start of things. A lot of DUIs, a lot of, other stuff like that.
I always love the ones of the students that come up to you at the end of class and the first 2 words that they say is, hypothetically speaking. And you're like, oh boy.
You immediately respond with, what'd you do?
Yeah. Go ahead and prepare myself. So here, I got another one that came up, speaking kind of this kind of moral compass, if you will. We've all dealt with cheating before. Cheating is just kind of one of those things that happens in class. But I've always had this thing where, if I catch you cheating, I'm going to pretty much let you know that I've caught you cheating. I'm going to take whatever utensil or tool you were using to cheat, and let you kind of make your own decision. I tell them the first day of class, if you cheat, you will fail the class. There's no questions about it. You will fail the class. No ifs, ands, or buts. But I remember one summer, I had a transient student come in from another college down the road. And typically it was very common for students from this college to come to our college because they think financial accounting is easier, which granted, taking financial accounting with 30 students is a lot easier than taking it with 300 students. So I get that. You're a little bit more comfortable. You can, but they would come thinking it'd be easier. So I had this one student that she was in my summer class and she was very, very participative. Like in the class, I was like, okay, she knows her stuff. And she took test 1, fine. Test 2, fine. And we get to the final, test 3. And she's sitting there taking the test. And I don't think students realize, I didn't even realize this until I was on the other side of the table as a professor, but I don't think students realize that teachers and professors know when you're cheating. A lot of times we don't know how you're cheating yet, so we're trying to figure that part out. But we know you're cheating. And so this girl was giving me all the cues that she was cheating, and I was watching. And usually when that happens, I'm already upset when they give me the cues because I'm thinking, you're taking my focus now away from something else. Now I have to watch you to see, if you're cheating or how you're cheating. So she would always, scoot back a little bit and look at her crotch while she's taking the test. And it's like, okay, something's in her lap. And she had her jacket in her, and this was a summer class. She had her jacket in her lap. And so I finally just said, okay, I figured it out now. So I walk over there and I said, all right, hand it to me. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, just hand me whatever you have in your lap. And after a little bit of time, she finally handed me her phone. And she had her phone. She had the notes on her phone. So I just took her phone back up to my desk, set it on my desk face down. And I just let it go. I didn't take her test up. I said, if you're going to keep taking, what the consequences are. If you want to keep taking the test, take the test. You're going to fail the class anyway. But I wasn't going to take it from her. If she wanted to waste her time, go for it. And so I sat back down. And she was just like, okay, I'm going to keep taking this test. Well, this was within the first 30 minutes. And 10 minutes later, she came to me. She's like, hey, may I go use the restroom? I was like, fine, go ahead. You're going to fail the class anyway. You can do whatever you want. So she went to the restroom. She came back. She was still giving me those cues that she was cheating again. And so I'm like, okay, here we go again. And
she's persistent.
She was doing it the same freaking way. She had it in her lap again. She'd scoot back a little bit and she'd look in her lap and then she'd go to writing, whatever. And finally I walked over. I said, all right, give it to me again. She's like, what are you talking about? I was like, I've been watching you doing the same thing you're doing before. She's like, I don't have anything. And she stands up. She takes her jacket out of her lap and plops it right on the desk to show that she didn't have anything in her lap. She didn't realize what she had, which was an iPod, not an iPhone, an iPod, the old school iPods, that when she went to the bathroom, I guess she pulled up her cloud that had the cheat sheet on it.
Uh-huh.
And so, but she didn't realize that it was heavy enough to go through the jacket. So when she plopped it down, you hear thud. I'm like, and then when you heard that sound, she just her head went down. And so she handed me her iPod. So I had her iPhone and her iPod sitting up from me. And I was like, well, and she kept taking the test. She kept taking the test to finish it. And she came up to me afterwards. She's like, well, I hope you have a great summer. And I'm like, you're going to fail.
I had a great summer.
I had a wonderful one.
You wasted most of your summer and your reputation.
Yeah, well, and that's the big thing is because, again, coming from a transient university, they have more stringent cheating outcomes. And so I'm thinking, holy crap. I mean, you went from, and again, obviously, one of the reasons why we look at it from, well, people could argue, okay, well, if she cheated on that test, then why not just fail her for that test? But I have to question, was she that good in all the other tests and I just didn't, or did I just not catch it?
Yeah.
So it always, that integrity is always questioned if something like that happens. So that's why it tends to go to, you just fail the class.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the same boat. I agree. The whole failing the class thing is probably the better outcome there. Because once again, it just violates every aspect of class rules and stuff. I have one similar scenario to that. And people, particularly in classes with auditorium style seating, and I always taught one class in an auditorium style. So I knew people were cheating in there, and it was very difficult to keep eyes on them because it was a big class, so 40 people, that type of thing. But during the class, I'm looking around at the front of the room. I'm standing up there watching around, and somebody's phone, their Google Assistant, just sounds off.
Oh God!
I'm sorry, I do not understand the question. During the class,
That's funny.
Like, really? How in the world did you whisper I assume they had an
Hey,
earbud
Alexa.
in somehow, and like facing the palm or whatever, and whispered the question into, but the phone was not outputting into the earbud; it was outputting through the speaker, and
That's
so everybody starts to chuckle. I'm like, I don't know who did it, and I'm not going to ask you to turn yourself in, but better not happen again. I knew what area of the
yeah,
classroom it happened in, so, but I certainly wasn't going to make the mistake of going around like accusing
yeah.
people or anything like that. So that was pretty
I
pretty
have.
similar.
So you brought up a good point. This one was probably my most embarrassing point that I think I've ever had teaching. So I have, Apple Watches and stuff. You can call on the voice activated assistants. I'm not going to say the name, but I was in the middle of class, and so I tell them, don't have your phones out or anything like that. And I was talking about, I can't remember even what I was talking about. I don't even think I was talking about this person. But all of a sudden, as I'm talking, I'm teaching, I hear the dial tone. You know how, when you call somebody, you hear this kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
I hear it like on speaker, and I'm like, somebody's phone's on. Somebody's calling somebody. And everybody's like looking around.
A phone a friend.
Like I was like, and no, this was just in class. But I was just like, somebody's calling somebody and it's on speaker. And everybody's looking around. And all of a sudden, I hear the voice of my brother going, "Hey, fat A." And I'm like, oh my God.
Hey, you just called somebody.
My watch turned on and somehow Siri heard that to call my brother. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And I was like, finally I had to go, I'll call you back. And I just turned my phone off. But man, that was so embarrassing because that's, my brothers and I pick on each other, and that's kind of a common way to answer the phone. And I was like, oh crap. That was my bad. And all I can think of is like, I put all this focus on, being professional in class because we're a professional business, you're getting a business degree, you want to be professional. And all of a sudden, like, that happened. I'm like, this is wonderful. This is a great way to have, to happen in class.
That's awesome. So I've probably got one more that was worth mentioning. Like, all these millions of little incidences, but this one wasn't really funny. This one was just like jaw dropping because it changed my entire perspective on the new generation of student. So I have this girl in class. Yeah. I mean, so you probably know I create a lot of content,
Mm-hmm.
and I use my content in class as reading, learning resources and things like that. And I announced at the beginning of the class that you're not going to have to buy the book. If you want to buy the book, you can. There's a recommended book by a publisher, whatever name publisher. You can get it if you want to. But I teach from my notes, and I have tons of notes. And basically, it's little mini chapters. I have tons of makeup questions. I have all sorts of stuff. And I say, this is all you're going to need for the class. You're not going to have to buy a book. It's going to be great. But there's one thing I need you to buy. And there are these case studies. So that's a reference that we'll use throughout. We'll work through these case studies. There'll be exercises, and we'll go through them in class, that type of thing. So you're going to have to buy that. And I think that's about, I don't know, $30 to $40. Okay. The textbook, though, is $250. So we're saving you a lot of money here if you don't want to buy the textbook. And a lot of people over the years have been quite appreciative of that. They will take my class just because they don't have to spend that extra few $100 on resources. Or at least I believe that's why they're taking my class. Anyway, they retake my classes.
It's because you're such a good professor.
Yeah, they just love that. So this student at the end of class comes up to me and in front of a bunch of people and says, I think it is dishonest, and just rips me a new one. And I'm standing there just dumbfounded that you would make us buy these case studies. And I don't even know how to respond. Yeah. I'm so just dumbfounded by what is being thrown at me. And she was angry. And I tend to have a temper myself. So I was very measured in this scenario, as I want to immediately cut her off and say something back,
Uh-huh.
but I listened to the whole thing in front of other people and I'm just taking it in. And then at the end, I summarize. I'm like, so I got this straight. I spend hundreds of hours creating content, the equivalent of an entire book for this course. So you don't have to buy a book. I create videos, I create questions, I create just massive amounts of content so I can teach this course without a book. So anybody can take advantage of these course resources because I put them out there in the public for free. And you are upset because as a supplement to that, I make you buy something that's $30 that you'll use in the course. And she said, well, here's one thing. You said it would be between $30 and $40. It was $45.
Ooh.
I said, yeah, I'm sorry. I must have mispriced that. And when I later look back in, they charge an administrative fee
I hate those.
of
Yeah.
about $10. So it threw it over,
Yeah.
over the price point that I thought it was. Okay. So anyway, I was dumbfounded. Now, this student, I basically didn't say anything. I said, well, perhaps I should have just made you buy the entire book along with it. And that would have been that, because that's what happens in most of your classes. And I'm just lost. I fail to see the connection between what I've done and that is dishonest, except for making you buy an additional case study thing. And I'm still not sure I picked up on where she was going with this about why I was so dishonest. But after that, I don't know whether she came to a realization but she actually liked the class and it seemed to like me a lot after that. But she just wanted to air her grievances up front about how this was such an unfair and unjust process. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to tell you. I was working hard to try to save you money, but I can't write these big case studies all, at least not immediately. It would take me a long time to do so. And anyway.
It's funny you say that because I had that on the other end. Our course evaluations. Like I'm somebody that I do take my course evaluations very seriously. I read all the comments and everything. Mm-hmm. And the first few years, I always had, I would have a student here, a student there, but they would always say, he makes us write too much in class. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's interesting because in my class, I give them, in the beginning, I gave them notes. All they had to do was fill in the blanks of the notes. So it's like one word here, one word there, just to kind of follow along with the slides of the problem that we're doing. But I gave them all the other stuff so they didn't have to worry about all the fluff.
Right.
But yet I made them write too much. I'm thinking, holy crap. There was classes where I had almost all my classes did that. Like where we had to write our own notes. And I'm just like, gracious. I guarantee you there's other classes going to make you write everything.
Yeah. I don't think most of the students realize what all we see in the classroom. And after a while, it gets repetitive, right? You see the same thing, the same cheating, the same overly involved student that just want to chat the whole time during class rather than learn anything, or the students who absolutely will not talk. Some, just can't stop talking the entire class. The ones who hate the idea of learning, and your non-traditional students who tend to be, I want to learn everything I can possibly get out of this because this is costing me money, type thing. It's just, I don't know. There's a full gamut of students. I am pretty glad that I've gotten to see them all over the years.
I would be willing to bet there's a listener out there that's probably thought of this, because I know I've been asked this before, but have you ever been asked a question by a student that you didn't have a clue what the answer was? Not even a clue.
So
I have. I'll never forget this day.
I'm trying to think. There have been a couple of times where I didn't fully know the answer, and I said, well, just let me look that up.
Yeah.
Type scenario.
It's always something that's uncomfortable with people. Like when you're not, if you're not a teacher, you're not a professor, the first question, like if you're going into that profession, is, well, what would I do if somebody asked me a question, like, and I don't know it? And I'm like, I'll tell them, I don't know. I'll figure it out for you.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
Yeah.
You know, and I've had that a lot where they ask a very detailed question. I'm like, I don't have any clue, but it'd be pretty easy to figure out because, you know, you just look here, and here, and that's where you get the answer. Or at least you get the context for the answer type thing. But yeah, no, not, you know, undergraduate, and I've primarily taught undergraduate that, yeah, I've rarely ever gotten that question. And, you know, it's just students don't know enough to ask a harder question.
You would think that, but that was my experience. That was my one time that I'll never forget. And God bless these. It was actually a married couple. They were an older couple that were coming back just to get their degree. And they were a delight to have in class. Like I wish I could have them in every semester. But he had like 30 years of accounting experience in like gold mining in another country. So it was international financial accounting, which is some of the toughest and some of the best experience you can have. And we were talking about the intro to financial accounting, like the most basic thing you can do. And he asked me a question and I was like, I don't have a clue. I don't even know what you're talking about. I've never heard those words before in my life.
Well, accounting for revenue for mineral resources, that is a completely different field or set, right?
Yeah.
About how you account for expenses and stuff like that.
It's incredible. And especially, like I said, in IFRS, you're talking about what IFRS is, international financial accounting. When you're talking about IFRS, it's a different set because we use GAAP here. And so it could be the same. I mean, there could be some overlap, but a lot of the times it's different. And he was talking about some stuff, and I was just like, do you want to teach the class? Because I don't have a clue what you're talking about.
Like, I'm going to need your help.
Yeah, I was like, holy crap, man. But then, like, again, after class, we talked about it, and you know, he's so knowledgeable about his area. And he was finding it tough in class. And he was like, I don't understand this. And finally, I got to the point where I realized you're so smart in your area that you have the experience in. This is so broad that you're essentially going to have to dumb yourself down.
Yeah.
And once he realized that, he was like, okay, I got this. And we moved past it. But it was just, I was like, man, I didn't. And my wife's always like, well, what are you going to do if somebody asks you a question? I told that man, I don't have a clue. I will look it up for you, though.
Be like, I will help you research that question.
That was a good question. Well, this has been a fun show, man. I'm happy with this. It kind of got us. We were having a good laugh before the episode, before we started recording, so it kind of kept us going on that. But I've enjoyed it. You got anything to say before we head out?
Just remind everybody, you got to visit that website, hit us up on the social media platforms, and of course, you got to give us those likes on the favorite podcasting app. But other than that, keep sending us your questions, and we'll keep answering them.
Absolutely. Until next time, we hope to see you there. Merry Christmas. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.